am super excited to have Lou Elizondo on our show. Lou is a former Pentagon official. He was also the director of the ATIP program, which we'll talk about, and a UAP expert, unidentified aerial phenomenon. Lou, thank you for joining me.
Terry, it is absolutely my sincere pleasure. And I just want to say before we begin, I really, really enjoy your show. And also thank you for your service to our country. I think I'm probably more excited to do this interview than you are probably excited to interview me. This is a wonderful treat for me.
No, I'm so glad, and thank you for coming on. We had Chris Mellon on a few weeks ago, and he was amazing. And so this is kind of the follow-on to Chris's episode for the followers of our show.
Well, unfortunately, I don't want to disappoint, but I'm not sure, Terry, I'm going to be able to match up to my esteemed colleague Chris. So I'm just going to put that out there right now to you and your audience. This will probably be a bit of a disappointment. Having him on first is like, having the rock star on stage first and then followed up by the warm-up band.
Nah, this is so we've got, before it was like it was the warm-up band before. This is now Queen just came on stage, or Aerosmith just took the stage. So first of all, I got to say, I normally don't sound like this. I mean, this is our first time doing a podcast. My hometown here in Texas baseball team is in the state playoffs. I drove up to Texas A&M last night, 2-hour drive. They're 30-0. They got a kid who's going to get drafted in the first round who made the most unbelievable double play, spinning 95-mile-an-hour throw to first base. I've never seen a double play like that. And they hadn't lost all year. They're ranked number 1 in the nation by Max Preps, and they lost. They looked awful. They had the worst game. They lost 10-6. So my voice is a little bit worn out after that late night game last night.
Sure. Well, Terry, unfortunately, this is my normal voice, and you're going to have to endure with it because it does not get any better. This is my, unfortunately, what you see is what you get with me.
I'm with you. And this is my normal face too. The people always tell me I've got a face for a radio. So I'm not sure.
Exactly.
I think that's a compliment, but I'm not sure. So Lou, this has been kind of a crazy month or 2 months or a year or several years really about UAPs. We used to call them UFOs. Now they're UAPs. There's stuff happening in the air that we don't fully understand. And I'm going to come at this as, I'm a former astronaut. I've never seen aliens or every speech I do, and I speak for a living, somebody asks me about aliens, and I'm happy to talk about it. I've never seen one. I've never seen a UFO myself, but the things that people have been seeing now are so compelling. And it's not some old guy that's really into mushrooms and he was really into heroin in the 70s and he's seeing aliens. This is not what's happening at all. We have data, we have radar tracking stuff. And so what I really want to do, normally I have kind of a map of the interview. I have nothing for you. I want to find out, are there drones out there? Are there balloons out there? Are there truly other things out there? And this is kind of I just want to hear what you have to say because you're so interested.
Sure.
You've been on TV, you've been in documentaries, you've been in movies, you were at the Pentagon. So I just want to have that conversation with you.
Yeah, sure, Terry. Well, look, let me begin by saying yes to all the above. Are there drones? Yes. Are there balloons? Yes. Are there weather anomalies? Yes. Are there aircraft? Yes. Are there missiles? Are there, you name it? Is there conventional technology out there that we misidentify all the time? Absolutely. But that's not really what our concern was when I was in the Pentagon. Our concern were those things that fell outside the normal performance envelope of conventional aircraft that you would at least consider to be conventional aircraft, to include, even some of the more exotic ones that we use some of the more high performance capabilities. Let me start also with this. The question is there a species that is able to be a spacefaring species? And the answer is unequivocally yes. We are one of them. Proof is in the pudding. Just look at us. You yourself spent some time in space. Someone built some sort of technology to, if you will, blow you out of Earth's orbit, albeit temporarily. And you are living proof that living things can indeed can become spacefaring. Now, the question you asked me is, Are there things out there that are not us that have that same potential? And that's precisely what we're trying to find out, Terry. There's enough data to suggest that there are things operating within our own airspace that is A, it's not ours. B, we're pretty sure it's not foreign adversarial. C, it's been doing this for a long time. And D, there's not a whole lot we can do about it. And so therein lies the issue. My background, I'm not a UFO guy. I'm not a ufologist. I'm just a former investigator and an intelligence officer. So my job was always to very simply collect the truth and speak the truth. That's it. And then present that information to a jury and let them decide. In this case, you and your audience are the jury. What I happen to personally think about something or feel about something is rather irrelevant, to be honest with you. It's just like an investigator. You don't. The jury doesn't ask, well, how do you feel about this?
Right.
It doesn't matter how I feel. What matters is, what does the data say? And then what matters is what you and your audience think about this or feel about it, not me. And so from that perspective, my job, the job of Chris Mellon, is fairly narrowly focused to really just collecting the facts and then presenting those facts to the jury, or in this case, a court of public opinion. There is enough information there that your government, my government, was willing to spend our taxpayer dollars, and by the way, it wasn't chump change either, to look into this. And the results of that information was very compelling. And now you have the eyewitness testimony of pilots and very, no nonsense people such as yourself, who spent time in the military, spent time even in space, coming out and say, yeah, you know what? I didn't want to say this before, but I saw something kind of weird too. And there we have it.
Yeah, the thing that strikes me about that is that the kind of people who are speaking up, the Fravor and these kind of guys and gals, are the kind of people, when they wake up in the morning, their goal for the day is to not see a UFO. Like, as a fighter pilot, they don't want to see UFOs. I can't imagine anything I would less, other than crashing. If I saw something like that and I reported it, I would be that guy. I would get a nickname in the squadron. I'd have a new call sign. These are the kind of people that are not wanting, to see this, and yet they have seen it, and they're kind of doing their duty to speak up about it. So
well, if you're lucky, they'll change your call sign. If you're unlucky, they'll take you off flight status. They'll give you a psychological evaluation, and you'll spend the rest of your career probably cleaning out jet turbine engines.
What is ATIP? Talk about that. I mentioned the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. Is that right? Is this Harry Reid?
So
Harry Reid funding? Is that what that was?
Well, it was your funding. It wasn't Harry Reid funding.
That's true.
Harry Reid was, Harry Reid didn't pay for it. Harry Reid was courageous enough to support this effort and champion it. But make no mistake, you paid for it. Your audience paid for it. Taxpayer money paid for it. And it was a very, very much a legitimate program. It had evolved a little bit over time from its nascent stage when it was first on the books in, I think, late 2007, early 2008. It morphed a little bit. It was originally under the umbrella called OSAP, and OSAP was another wonderful DoD acronym that was used. But later on, that it really kind of evolved into the what everybody now knows as ATIP, and now the UAP Task Force.
So when I came to NASA as an astronaut, I was an Air Force guy, so I thought it's like learning a new language. I thought the Air Force was pretty impressive at acronyms, but nobody holds a candle to NASA. It really is a new language. It's like I had to learn Russian and I had to learn NASA when I went to NASA. So these are programs that were officially funded by the DoD, and they were looking into this phenomenon. And now there's a new bill. It just came out at the very tail end of the Trump administration. Somebody snuck in this language that the DoD had to come up with a report within 6 months of what's going on with all this stuff. And I was laughing with Chris when Chris was there. There's some poor, and I don't know. And one of the proudest things about my 30 plus years of Air Force service is that I've never been to the Pentagon. I've literally never set foot in it. I
God bless you.
high five myself every day that I've never been there. But I can imagine in my brain, I see this poor 06. It's some colonel or maybe a Navy captain who has to go around and meet the admiral and meet the general, and everybody hates him. He hates his job. Now he's never going to make admiral or general because it sucks to be him. And I can just imagine there's not a lot of excitement inside the building. Is that true? Or are people, it was probably different in 2008. I'm guessing now it's a little bit more accepted, but I can just imagine this bureaucratic resistance to what's,
Yeah, I mean, I'll share with you. We affectionately, those of us who worked at the Pentagon, we had kind of a nickname for it. We affectionately referred to it as the Death Star. So you're going, you get your assignment back at the Death Star, and you got to go back to to headquarters. Unfortunately, the UAP task force was born out of political pressure. There was enough pressure being placed on the Pentagon publicly and from our legislators that the Pentagon was forced to create this capability. Now, there were elements in there that I have to applaud. For example, DepSecDef Norquist, he took a chance and created this because he knew it was important to follow. But unfortunately, there are also pockets of resistance within the Pentagon, and those pockets of resistance are still very influential and very vocal. And yeah, they make people's lives miserable. Why are we doing this? Why are we studying this? Why are we spending our time, money, and resources on it? Ultimately, those pockets were never briefed. They were certainly not briefed by me, and I suspect they're probably reluctant because it's, first of all, you have mission creep, as you know, in the government, right? So we get every day we get more and more added to our plate. Nothing ever falls off. Everything's a priority.
Right.
Two, I think there's a fundamental lack of understanding of what we're dealing with. And when you're looking at, for example, the height of the Cold War, and by the way, the efforts of ATIP have been going on for decades. It wasn't called ATIP at one time; it was called Project Blue Book and whatnot. Right. But the bottom line, we've seen these things in our skies for quite some time, displaying these beyond next generation technologies. So we've always known they're real. The problem is there wasn't a whole lot we could do about it. And also at the time, we were thrust in the middle of what we called the Cold War, which, by the way, coincidentally wasn't very cold. It was a pretty hot war, to be honest with you. But the big threat there was nuclear proliferation, and then the threat of Soviet Union. So those were very clearly definable threats, and you and I were products of that genre. And so that was that's a very clear enemy that you can look at and say, okay, they've got nukes, they're hostile, they don't like us, we're playing this game of chess on a global scale through proxy wars and whatnot. That's a very easy enemy to define.
Yeah.
When you are talking about UAPs, there's two things to determine if something is a threat. We have capabilities versus intent. Well, we've seen some of the capabilities, we have no idea the intent. And since there's no overt hostile action being taken by these things, and a lot of the information at the time was anecdotal, I think there was a conscious decision by the Pentagon brass to say, you know what? Yes, we kind of know they're there, but since they're not bothering us, let's go ahead and focus our time and attention on those things that are bothering us.
Afghanistan, like Syria, whatever. Yeah,
absolutely. A crisis du jour. So I think that probably is part of it too. There is a tremendous amount of social stigma and taboo associated with this topic, because we haven't done ourselves any favors. We spent 70 years putting out, silly Hollywood B movies and people wearing tinfoil hats and these UFO conventions where people wear green suits and Elvis on the mothership. When in reality, that's not at all what we're talking about. We're talking about some sort of advanced technology that is in some cases behaving fairly provocatively at this point. And when I say provocatively, I don't mean necessarily hostile. What I mean is provocative.
Yeah.
And now it's to the point where we really simply can't ignore it anymore. So that's kind of where we are, as a snapshot, so to speak.
So how many years were you there doing this, digging around in the Pentagon?
Almost 10, from 2008, and then I left in 2017.
Okay. Almost a decade. Did you meet Chris Mellon while you were at the Pentagon then?
I did. Very, very tenacious man. I respect Chris tremendously. I've said before, there's 5 people on this hand that I can count. And if they called me at 4 a.m. and said, put your boots on, I need you to go with me to war, I would do it. And Chris Mellon's in that category. This is a person who's no nonsense, held one of the most senior positions in the Pentagon, also worked for our legislative branch, was one of the founding fathers of Special Operations Command, SOCOM. And he found his way to me, and the conversations. I spent about 4 or 5 months probably pushing him away, and trying to come up with every excuse I could not to breathe him on. And
Right.
ultimately, he had managed to jump through all the administrative hoops. And at that point, there was no reason why I had to tell him, because he had all the clearances that I asked him to get.
Right.
Which, frankly, between us, I thought it would never happen. I told one of my ops officers, I said, "Well, we don't have to worry about him. We'll never see him again," because I know some of those read-ons took about a year to get, if not
Right.
longer. And he came
Right.
back the next week. So at that
Yeah.
point, I recognized, okay, this guy means business.
He's legit.
Um,
He's an amazing guy.
oh, he is. He
Yeah.
is absolutely. He's truly a national treasure.
Yeah.
Incredible human. He does not have to be doing this. He's got a tremendous reputation from his family, right?
Right.
And yet he decided to risk it all to have this conversation with the American people. So for that, I
Right.
respect him tremendously. And
Right.
he's also a very dear friend too.
Right. He's a good guy. I mean, he's Chris Mellon from Pittsburgh. It was funny. I was telling my friend he's running a business and he's in Pittsburgh because of Carnegie Mellon and the amount of tech, the people there. Like, there's a lot of great talent to hire. And I was like, you're at Carnegie Mellon. I need to put you in touch with this guy, Chris, blah, blah, blah. And then I was like, wait a minute. He's Chris Mellon. Okay, never mind. It's never mind, Chris. You're already attached with Carnegie Mellon. So yeah, amazing.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Yeah, it took me. I'm slow, man. I'm just an Air Force fighter pilot. So
And his family is beautiful too, by the way.
yeah,
I mean, it's not just Chris. He's got this incredible support mechanism. It's his
yeah,
children, his lovely wife, just a super super human being and a super family.
right. Well, for those listening to the podcast, if you get a chance, listen to the episode with Chris Mellon, because it was pretty good, and this will be a good follow-on. So you're at the Pentagon. You're working on this ATIP program, which in some ways is like a follow-on to Project Blue Book that we all saw TV shows about when we were kids. And there's shit happening in the skies. And so I want to talk about like what was happening, like what could be going on that would cause the Pentagon and Harry Reid and all this millions of dollars and undersecretaries of defense to get, focused on it. What was happening? I just kind of want to lay it out. Everybody's seen the Navy video and blah, blah, blah. Let's just talk about, like, from A to Z, what was going on? What has been happening? Yeah.
Well, when you say what was happening, is actually it was the opposite. Is why Chris and I got so engaged, because we kept getting reports from the field. In some cases, some very emotional pleas from some very senior people saying, "Hey, look, I got these all over the ship. I can't keep people below deck forever. What do you want me to do?" Right. And so my intent was to, bring the cavalry, sound the bugle and bring the cavalry. Say, "Look, I got it, sir. Got it, ma'am. We are working on some solutions for you." The problem is the cavalry never came. I would go up and I brief it to seniors, and they say, "This is interesting. This is fantastic. Great. But we don't want to let the boss know." And
Who's a
as
senior?
the boss was.
What is a senior?
So, a senior is the number one, number two people in the Pentagon. We're talking about people that are working with the Secretary of Defense in his suite, that are the senior. I don't want to say their position, because then people know who they are and they haven't come out publicly yet.
Right.
But these were some of the most senior people in the Department of Defense. They were his direct, his confidants. Think of his senior advisors, right?
I know.
And
I know who you're talking about. This is why I'm having this conversation. Is one of those seniors approached me. So anyway,
yeah.
I know,
and by the way, it's, for the record, it wasn't their fault. Okay, they're hindsight always being 20/20. I understood.
Right.
I was frustrated because I was an operator. My job is to identify issues and find solutions. We had a new Secretary of Defense, Jim Mattis. This is a person that I had the honor to serve with in combat. An incredible human being, but the bureaucracy was incredible. One of the, again, on my top 5 for sure.
Yeah.
And this is a man, as you know, and I know, always has a career of always wanting to have more. His success is based on more information, not less. Right. But the Praetorian Guards were keeping that from him. I understand now why, because they were trying to protect the boss. He had this incredible reputation as, Mad Dog Mattis, the man, the myth, the legend. And all of a sudden, if he got questioned by Congress or the media, say, "Hey, have you been briefed on UFOs?" They didn't want to put him in that situation. They were trying to protect him while at the same time find solutions
Right.
for our issues at the more tactical and operational level. But unfortunately, there was this almost paralysis by analysis where
Right.
I'd go back, we'd perform more briefings, I get more eyewitnesses to come in, they would brief, we'd show videos, we'd show analysis, we'd show photos, we'd have the reports and whatnot. And there was this hesitation. The first person I briefed, they actually didn't even want to have the conversation. I spent an hour and a half briefing this individual, and at the conclusion of the briefing, I remember it clear as day yesterday. He looked at me and he said, "So how does Miami Hurricanes doing? How's the football team doing this season?" And I was I was shocked because I spent an hour and a half and it just wasn't seen. He just couldn't process it, right?
Right.
And then other times, I remember I would brief a senior and they'd kind of look at you and kind of smile after 20 minutes and said, "Man, is this a joke or you're kind of wasting my time here, right? Because I got real important things to do." And then lastly, one of the seniors fortunately took it serious, and he actually a former fighter pilot himself, and he was actually very helpful. Unfortunately, we still failed to get it to Secretary Mattis, but
Right.
he was sympathetic, and he looked at it and he took the briefings, and we had the pilots come in, the radar operators come in, and I truly believe sincerely he was trying to find a solution, but he was also caught between protecting his boss
Yeah.
and also doing what's necessary to help the field. But at the end of the day, I'd been doing this for almost 10 years, and finally, for me, the clock ran out. I said,
Yeah.
"Look, guys, I don't have the horsepower, I don't have the funding and the resources anymore to do the right job, and I'm failing the people in the field. They're expecting me for a resolution, and I keep telling them we're going to give them one, and we don't." And so finally, out of protest, I submitted my resignation. And by the way, for the record, that senior at DoD, I have no hard feelings at all about.
Right.
He's if I was in his position, hell, I probably would have done it exactly like he did. So
Yeah.
again, this is not a blame game. This
Yeah.
is just the bureaucracy. It really, it not only did it affected me and the people in the field, but I think it also affected him as well. I think he was put in a really difficult position. And the bureaucracy there was no mechanism to report this type of information.
Yeah.
So, and he is
One of
new to the
those.
job. So he had just come
Right.
in. He's like, "Look, we don't even have a USDI yet. We've got an
Right.
acting USDI. Half of the chain of command isn't even in place yet. We gotta sit on this a little bit longer." And, a little bit longer became a little bit longer and a little bit longer. So
It's the Pentagon, it's bureaucracy. One of those individuals actually pulled me aside at a meeting one time, and he was like, "Terry, you gotta," and he told me what was going on, and it kind of blew me away. So that's why we're having this conversation, is because of one of those individuals. So
yeah,
so the bottom line is, for the listeners, there's bureaucracy. It is impressive. At the Pentagon bureaucracy, it's the largest organization in human history. I mean,
it is.
in terms of dollars, there's never been a larger organization. So you can imagine, when there's, a billion here, a billion there, before long, you're talking about real money. There's a lot of internal resistance to anything that's going to change, whatever. I can only imagine. But you said something just then, Lou, in that what you were just saying, that kind of blew me away. There were Navy ship captains that were having to keep their crew below decks because there were things flying around.
That's correct.
Like, that's a Hollywood movie from the 80s.
Oh, I'll tell you, man, some of this stuff was absolutely riveting. One of
Let's
these
talk
days,
about
a
the stuff.
story.
Let's talk about the stuff. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll share with you one interesting event that occurred. It's pretty incredible. You have. I'm not going to go into too much detail. I want people to know who it is. The person is kind of
Yeah.
very cagey about this, but you have a helicopter going out of a Caribbean island on a regular basis because the Navy likes to test fire some of its cruise missile technology and whatnot. And what will happen is that after the cruise missile runs out of fuel, it kind of splashes into the ocean. It will sink, and then at a certain time, it kind of rises up, and we go and fetch it. And we analyze it for telemetry and things like that. Long story short, helicopter crew goes out to recover one of these things. As they are recovering it the first time, the missile, they're pulling up, and something, what was described, round and circular, about the size of a small island, black, dark color, starts rising to the surface. It doesn't break the water, but it starts rising to the surface. They thought, wow, that's really, really peculiar. Well, the next month goes around, and they go out to retrieve this another missile that was test fired. And this time we've got a frogman hanging down from the rope, about to latch on to the missile, and this thing starts coming out of the water again. And if you know about the Puerto Rican trench out there, you're talking about water that's 22,000 feet deep. It's the second deepest part of the ocean. The thing starts rising up, and as the thing is starting to come to the surface, the frogman is literally trying to climb the rope. They're doing an emergency ascent. Everybody is absolutely panic at the disco, freaking out. What the hell is that? What's going on? And as they start to pull up, it sucks the missile underwater and then disappears, never to be seen again. I mean, there's incidents like that just kind of make the hair stand up on the back of your neck and go, what?
When was that?
It was a little while ago. I don't want to go into too much detail because, like I said, the person wants their privacy.
Yeah.
I know the individual personally. I've talked to him. He's not. He does not want any type of publicity. He's actually, I think, kind of averse to it. He doesn't want to be. He's kind of seen what happened to me and others. So he's like, Lou, I don't want any part of that.
Like I said in the beginning, the kind of people who are making these reports are the kind of people who wake up in the morning and they say, all right, today I'm not going to see a UFO, because if I do, it's going to screw my career. And then if you're the UFO guy at the Pentagon, how does that help your career? Right. So that's unbelievable. I've never heard that, Lou. And even in the I've watched Phenomenon, and I've watched several of the things that you've been on. I've never heard that story before. So in my mind, all these different events, and I'd like for you to maybe walk through the timeline or just categorize them. There's the Tic Tacs, these nondescript, cylinders that the Navy fighter pilots saw in 2004 that went really fast from the ocean to space to high speeds, whatever. And that's truly not explainable. There are these triangles that look like drones that have lights flashing, and I think people in Belgium, around the world, but I want you to talk about those. They may or may not be drones. And then there's these things that look like balloons. They're kind of translucent balloon looking things. So there's the triangles, the balloons, and the Tic Tacs. Those are the three things that I've heard about. Chris talked about one that went from Canada down to Cuba, and we weren't able to intercept it. But let's just I don't know, somehow there's all these things, and my brain gets confused. I'm a linear thinker. So let's go A, B, C, D. What are these different things?
Sure.
And now there's the island that's floating out of the Caribbean. I never heard of that before.
Yeah, let's deconstruct a little bit. Well, the island may be enigmatic of something that we've seen before. When the pilots first described the Tic Tac in 2004, they noticed an object just under the water, and the water seemed to be roiling on top.
Churning,
and so, churning. And so, we may be dealing with something similar. We don't know yet, but certainly there's some interesting congruencies. Two, when we talk about the Tic Tac, and then I'll get into some of the other questions you had specifically. This is, we call it the Tic Tac, but your audience might be surprised to know that in the 1950s, these things were still being reported through official U.S. government channels, but they were being described as 40-foot white flying butane tanks, which looks an awful lot like a Tic Tac. And then they were being described in the 60s as white flying lozenges, right? Again, that cylindrical object performing exactly the same way.
Was that in Blue
so
Book?
There's a long
Blue Book?
No, these are some other documents that at some point will probably see the light of day very soon. So there's a long history here of these vehicles being reported, and basically, depending on the genre you grew up in, it's either a butane tank, it's a Tic Tac, it's a lozenge. It's just it's a label that we give because of the sign of the time.
Right.
But they're describing the same object. Now, you kind of go into a question as far as categories and descriptions. So there is the historical lenticular shape or saucer shape that people are familiar with.
Right.
Then there is another category or perhaps classification of observed craft, which is a long cylindrical or oval shaped craft, which tends to be a little bit bigger than the disc shaped craft. And then you have these much larger triangular shaped vehicles that have been described, and then the really big ones are almost like a boomerang.
Right.
One of the observations that we had in ATIP, among many, was that it could very well be that these vehicles look the way they do because of the specific function. So what do I mean? The discs tend to be not always, but tend to be observed as being small type of craft. So think of a Corvette. You can fit two people in a Corvette and you can zoom around the streets all day long.
Right.
But let's say you now need a school bus. You need something bigger than a Corvette because you want to put more people in it or more equipment or more supplies, whatever. You need a bigger vehicle. And so you have that long cylindrical school bus that may be for other reasons. And then let's say we need not a school bus, but we need an aircraft carrier. I need something so big I can put a whole lot of people, a whole lot of equipment to do a very specific function. Well, that would maybe be your triangles. It could very well be that the triangular craft are so big because they're performing a very specific function. And
Right.
those tend to be the very big craft. And then on rare occasions are reported an enormous craft, which tends to look like a boomerang. Think of a cylinder, but bent, and you have this just enormous vehicle. There is some speculation why these vehicles are shaped the way they're shaped and perform the way they perform. I won't go into a lot of detail here, but it may very well be that the shape of the craft is specific to the function and mission of a specific. No different than us in humans, right? An F-16 looks like an F-16 because it's designed to be an interceptor,
Right.
whereas a B-52 looks like a B-52 because it's designed to carry a lot of weight and drop, bombs, ordnance.
Right.
They're both aircraft, but they look differently, they function differently because they perform different missions.
Okay. But are those basically in terms of all these things that different people are seeing? There's the triangles, there's the balloons, there's the tic tacs, and there's like
Well,
UFO. There's the saucer. So those kind of the four basic types of things that
yeah,
people
I
are
mean, there's a
seeing?
lot of, again, misidentifications out there. The more people get sense. Here's the catch-22 in this whole thing. The more people are aware of the reality of a UAP, the more people are going to look to the skies, and the more we're going to misidentify things.
Right.
But that's
Right.
okay, because
Right.
I think you have to figure out a way to separate the wheat from the chaff. And in this
Right.
particular case, this is precisely what the Pentagon is trying to figure out. And I think people should be patient because there's going to be a lot of things misidentified in the beginning.
Well,
But then
there's
there's
been
things.
pictures. Let's talk about the data. So as a test pilot, I used a lot of different types of radar. I used a lot of different infrared cameras and tracking systems. And in the 50s and 60s, we didn't really have we had some stuff, but that data is a lot better. The Navy Spy 1 radar on these Aegis cruiser, these big giant electronically scanned array radars. Is that true that with the higher quality tracking data that we have, the better data we're getting on these types of things? Is that true?
Yeah, so it is. Let me kind of put this into perspective. In the old days, and you brought up a very good point. Let's say you have a radar tower. You had one radar tower sending out a radar beam in a particular frequency, and that radar signal gets bounced back off of an object and comes back. So you're transmitting and receiving, and very much like sonar, but from the electromagnetic perspective,
Right.
you're picking up that object and its reflection of a signal.
Right.
As we got better and better with radar data, when you talk about the Spy 1 radar, the Spy 1 radar really isn't just a radar. It is a suite of collection sensors. And I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here because some of it's probably a little bit sensitive, but think of a radar that now has the ability to talk to other radars and then integrate that information and create a common operating picture of the battle space or the operating area. How about that? And so it's not just picking up its own signal it's sending out, it's integrating other radar that's coming in that may be airborne based radar, ground based radar, and it's integrating all of that. It's looking at all the various different bits and pieces of information to give you a much more higher fidelity picture of
on a
the
Navy
area.
ship. And Spy 1
On a
is
Navy ship.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Correct, the spy one radar. And so you're looking in essence being able to pick up a baseball at 80,000 feet. That's how sensitive these things are,
Right.
and which is extremely capable, far much better than what we had back in the 50s. And you said it yourself, we've come a long way in our evolution. So it's important to know that even our aircraft now, and I don't need to tell you this, but what the modern day aircraft is it's pretty much a flying sensor unit. It is
Yeah.
designed to pick up anything and everything. It's not just a weapons platform anymore. It's
Right.
much more. And that information then gets fed back to the ship, and of course, all that information then is processed and analyzed. So now the same picture you're seeing on the boat can now be the same picture you're seeing in the aircraft, which is the same picture that the generals are going to be seeing, sitting at a fob, which is the same picture that people are going to be seeing on the E2 Hawkeye. That is what we spend our money on, trying to create this battle space awareness. And so that's the technology we're dealing with today. So when you see something on radar, it's important for your audience to know it's not just a ghost in the machine. It's not just a blip that maybe your one particular radar is picking up, because the radar systems of today are designed to automatically filter out. If all this radars aren't seeing the same picture, there is some sort of reconciliation that occurs internally to determine if something real or not. And if it's not, it typically will just filter it out.
It's noise, right? So what I've read, and you can enlighten this, in the 2004 incident, when Dave Fravor and others saw the Tic Tacs, and the radar operators on the ships were seeing these things, that data accidentally got deleted. Is that true? There's been radar.
I guess
there's been radar data deleted.
Yeah, I guess kind of like my emails at the Pentagon that have been accidentally deleted. I don't.
Sometimes it happens.
Yeah. Yeah, just one of those things, I guess, right? There's some allegations there that look, the deck logs are supposed to be kept, and they usually get sent to the National Archives for posterity's sake. Well, it's interesting because on the Princeton, the deck logs are missing for that very one day that they encountered the
That's
Tic Tac.
weird. That's really weird.
That is weird, isn't it? I wonder why. Yeah.
The Princeton is the Navy destroyer with this super fancy Spy 1 radar that was out there off the coast of California when these Navy fighter pilots saw these Tic Tacs. And now we've all seen the video through the New York Times and CNN and others. Yeah. Okay.
Aegis class destroyer.
Help the listeners out. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's also important to know it wasn't just the Spy 1 radar. It was also picked up. I spoke to the radar operators when I was back in Egypt on the E2 Hawkeye.
So you talked to the Navy enlisted men and women and officers.
Oh yeah,
you talked to them.
Yeah, that was my job.
Okay, and what they say?
They briefed the seniors. I had them come up to the secretary to Secretary's suite to brief the seniors.
So these poor E5s and O3s had to go to the Pentagon and talk to top brass at the Pentagon. And what do they say?
Yes. Well, I think they were clearly a little bit nervous because you don't walk into the Secretary's suite every day, so they're kind of like,
I've never done it myself.
They provided their information, but what you had was you had these workups. So let me kind of start from the beginning here for your audience who may not be familiar with military operations. So we have these strategic aircraft carrier strike groups. Think of a floating piece of the United States that we can move anywhere around the world. Mm-hmm. And when you think of an aircraft carrier, people think of this great big ship with a bunch of planes on the deck, but that's really only one part of the carrier fleet. Okay, mm-hmm. These ships never sail alone. They've got escorts with them. They have defense mechanisms. They've got submarines. They've got all sorts of stuff. Right. So what you're trying to do is replicate a piece of sovereign United States and control that area anywhere in the world. Right. So before the one of their deployments, they were doing what they call workups, which is their exercises, their training, trying to replicate real world scenarios, and so they can hone their skills and keep sharp before they actually have to go to combat or go to war. So they're off the coast of California, they're off of San Diego, they're doing their workups about 60 miles off, I think, in the Whiskey operating area. And
Whiskey is a warning area. It's a piece of airspace that as a fighter pilot we go and do our exercises, and the Whiskey areas are off the coast. So
correct,
right.
And so we've got these these two F-18 Hornets up there playing cat and mouse, and you've got two others. So you have a blue force and a red force. You have a good guys and bad guys, right? And you're gonna do your war scenarios. And so they're out there doing their thing, and all of a sudden, in the middle, they get waved off. They get this radio call coming in from the E2 Hawkeye and saying, "Hey guys, just a heads up, we see something on our radar." Initially, the E2 Hawkeye radar operator thought it was maybe just wave top, because a lot of times those radars are so sensitive that if you have a high enough wave, you can pick those up. Wow. But this was a calm and steady sea state at the time. So they realized, hey, look, it's not a wave top. He says, well, I'm picking up something. And as they're having this conversation, the Princeton jumps in and says, yeah, we pick it up too. In fact, we want you guys to stop doing your war games, and we want you to go beat feet over and check this thing out. So they were vectored to it. It's not like the pilot said, hey, I'm curious, let me go. No. The Princeton said, you will stop what you're doing, and we want to reroute you and go take a look at what the hell that thing is going on.
Okay. And this is
so
Dave
the pilots
Fravor.
go.
This is Dave Fravor.
It's I can the names I can say is Dave Fravor, Jim Slate, and Alex Dietrich. There's another person there, but they haven't come out publicly yet, so I'm not going to mention their name.
Okay.
So you have two aircraft, a front seater pilot and a backseat wizzo, a weapons officer.
Right.
And so they're going out to check out what's going on. So they boogie on over.
And Goose.
Yeah, right. Maverick and Goose, you got it.
Right.
Except for not F-14 Tomcats, they're flying F-18.
F-18, exactly.
Yeah. So they head on over, and I remember talking to one of the pilots, and the pilot was telling me, initially I was excited. I thought maybe that we're going to go do some drug interdiction. Maybe there's some low flying Cessna that's bringing in some dope, and we can go ahead
from Mexico. Yeah.
Yeah. And as they get to the area, they're getting closer. The Princeton says, "Okay, you're right where you need to be. Start looking around." And so they start looking around, and pilots both look down, and they see this, what seems to be this submerged object under the water, was described as almost the size of a 737 underwater. So initially, all of a sudden, their hearts start to race. They're thinking, "Oh no, we've got a downed aircraft," and the water's roiling on top of this. But as they look down, they realize that there is this, what looks to be this tic tac, but this tic tac is floating over the water, and it's behaving like a ping pong. It's not flying in a linear fashion that you would expect with a leading edge, a trailing edge, a nose, a tail, right, and aerodynamics. It's kind of doing this all over the place, and obviously that was rather startling. That it's not a helicopter. It's moving too fast to be a helicopter. There's no control surfaces, no wings, no ailerons, no elevators, no rudders, no cockpit, no obvious signs of propulsion. It's just this ping pong moving around. So Dave Fravor, who's really, like you, as you know, as a fighter pilot, you guys tend to be a rare breed. I often joke about Dave that he's one of the few guys I know that actually runs towards danger and not away.
He's a squadron commander, right? He's kind of a big deal. Yeah.
Well, he's also Top Gun. He's also a Top Gun guy. So I mean, he's probably the most seasoned pilot on the carrier.
On the boat. So he's legit. This is a legit guy.
Oh yeah, he's way legit. And so he says, "Hey, I'm going to go, take a look and get close to this thing." And the other pilot's like, "Yeah, cool. I'm just going to hang out here. I'll keep high cover because I don't know what that is."
Let me know how it is.
Yeah, right. I'll watch from up here. And so Dave goes in, and as Dave and his Wizzo start to come in, this tic tac all of a sudden orientates itself directly at him, almost like pointing at him, right? Like, "Hey, I know you're here."
Right.
And so Dave starts to come in on a slow and steady arc, this thing starts to mirror his position, maintaining a safe distance, not letting Dave get close, but mirroring his image and meeting and coming up to meet him. So now you're talking about an object that is somehow aware of the presence of U.S. military aircraft and is being controlled intelligently by someone or something. Right. And as Dave comes in, he kind of loses his patience, him and the Wiz, and they said, "You know what? Screw it. I'm just going to go ahead and cut this in half. I'm just going to come straight in at it and see what happens."
They have tapes running. This is all recorded.
There is. I'm going to be very careful what I say here. There is video evidence of this craft. There's data. Right. So he cuts in and comes in, and as he starts to close the gap, this thing just boom disappears over the horizon, and it does so at an incredible velocity, and disappears over the horizon in about 2 seconds, maybe less.
So give me
And
numbers. By disappearing, what's the distance, range?
So we're going to get to that right now. So
Okay,
here's exactly what happens. So about 5 seconds later, the Princeton comes in and says, hey, you're not going to believe this, but we had this thing on radar and it's waiting for you at your cap point. Now, a cap point is a rendezvous point
right.
that is pre-established by the pilots. It's nothing that is broadcast. It's nothing that can be exploited or extrapolated. It's there. And you're looking at a distance of 65 miles from where they were to where this object is now in 5 seconds.
In seconds.
So 5 seconds. So think about moving 65 miles in 5 seconds. That's
faster than
extraordinary.
And in orbit,
that's 17,500 miles an hour, right?
We go about 5 miles a second in orbit. So that's, they were going 13 miles a second if I'm doing my math in public, right? So they're going almost 3 times orbital velocity.
Right. So if the data is correct, that's exactly what occurred, and that's the Nimitz incident. So then they're running low on fuel. They go back to the aircraft carrier. They scramble 2 more. They launch 2 more F-18 Hornets because one of these guys is a hotshot Marine who says, you know what, I'm going to go find this thing. I'm going to go get it. Right. And he did. And that is the famous Tic Tac video.
So the video was that when you hear the guys yelling and you can see it moving and there's a weird line of sight because it's not, I don't think the video is right off the nose of the airplane, right? It's looking off to the side as it's tracking the Tic Tac.
Yeah. So you have
against the background. Yeah.
Right. And then all of a sudden it just kind of bang shoots off and the camera's not moving. The object is definitely moving. And that of course is backed up by radar. It's not just some grainy video. People say, oh, look, it's the dot and you're moving the camera. That's not at all what happened. And so that's the famous Nimitz incident. What people don't know is that there's been other incidents before that in the same exact waters involving the USS Boxer. And there's been incidents after that in the same waters, as we now see with the Kid and the Omaha. So these things continue to occur. And I think people look back and they say it's episodic. I know about the Nimitz incident. I know about the Roosevelt incident. Yeah, but what you don't know, this is continuing to occur to this day. Hasn't stopped. This is not just a one-off.
So something is happening under the water. This thing is in the air. Does it go up into space?
Well, we've caught them so remember what I said about the Spy 1 radar. It can pick up a baseball at 80,000 feet.
Right.
It picked these objects
looking
up
this way. It's not looking
correct
necessarily in
space.
Space.
Right. So what we do know is these things have been picked up at 80,000 feet. And within a second or less, we see them dropping out of sky and then hovering over the water at 50 feet over the water and then popping back out again. In the words of Kevin Day, who, by the way, is probably one of the world's premier radar operators, also a Top Gun graduate, in his words, it was raining UFOs. And you could see that on the scope. And now, as we've seen as of today,
it wasn't just
No, and it occurred over a period of days. And look, I'll tell you in your audience right now, and the video just came out that was authenticated by the Pentagon yesterday. Someone took a video of the radar scope from one of the Navy vessels this last year, and wow. they are you can see them. They're right there on the scope.
So there's more than one track. There's more than one track. There's more than one target.
Yes.
And are they? Okay, wow. So the military person in me is saying that this is a way to probe our defenses. You can see our reaction time. You can learn about our capabilities by doing what they're doing. They're not attacking us. They're not trying to shoot us down. It seems more like a learning exercise than a aggressive exercise. Because
it's definitely provocative.
Yeah.
Right. And it's provocative, but we're not sure yet hostile. And there's a difference.
Right.
And that's why we have to be careful. Because the moment you say it's a potential threat, people say, you're fear mongering, or how do you know it's hostile? Well, we're not. Look, air safety is an issue. It's a threat. If I've got a commercial 737 flying from Baltimore to, let's say, Denver, and it's got 230 people on board, kicking back, drinking cocktails and waiting to see grandma. And you got one of these things coming up close and personal, and the pilots aren't prepared. Now you have in a situation where you might have to take evasive maneuvers. You have an air safety issue. You have a collision potential. And that's problematic. Is it hostile? No. Is it a threat? Yes. So that's, we have to be careful when we use that terminology, because I've had people misunderstand what we were trying to say in the Pentagon.
Right.
And
So, so this has been going on. The 2004 incident is the famous one, but you said there was incidents before this, and there's been incidents since then.
oh yeah,
Of
yeah.
these specific types of vehicles, whatever they are.
Of some sort of high performance vehicle displaying what we would consider beyond next generation technology, the ability to perform instantaneous acceleration, hypersonic velocities, stealth or cloaking or low observability, transmedium travel, and ultimately, what has been described. Yeah.
Transmedium, meaning air, land, sea, space.
Yeah, so it means space. Yeah, so as you know, we are as a species, when we create, when you look at, you create let's say let's just take, for example, an F-22 Raptor, one of our most capable fighter aircraft that we have right now. This is a high performance aircraft that is designed to fly in atmosphere, and so it's aerodynamic and whatnot. But when you compare that to, let's say, a Russian Proton rocket, or the Soyuz spacecraft,
right?
It doesn't look anything like an F-22, because that rocket, as you know, is going to be performing maneuvers in outer space where there is no atmosphere. There's no atmospheric resistance. Right, exactly, right.
I got a
So you have
model up there.
thrusters.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and you don't have a jet engine. You have a chemical rocket engine, because
Right.
wings and jet engines are useless in space. And then when you compare that, let's say, to a submarine, it doesn't look like a rocket or a plane, because it's designed to operate underwater. In fact, it uses buoyancy and ballast to go up and down. It has a propeller to mechanically displace water, and
Right.
that's why a submarine looks like a submarine. And if
Right.
you want to create something that can operate in multiple environments, let's say a seaplane, there's always a design and performance sacrifice. A
Of
seaplane, as you
course.
know, is neither
Right.
a really good plane nor is it a really good boat, because it has to
Right.
operate. It has to operate in both environments. And then you take the space shuttle, which is one of my personal favorites. It
Yeah.
operates in the atmosphere and in space and on the ground. But as
Right.
you know, it's a design compromise.
Of
The
course.
spaceship does,
Right.
the space shuttle doesn't necessarily fly with a jet engine. It kind of glides back down to Earth, and
Right.
because there's these design compromises. What
These
we
Tic
are
Tacs do it
seeing,
all. These Tic
they
Tacs
do
do
it
it,
all without any type of performance or design compromise at all. Correct.
including space.
Space and underwater. Yeah, that for us is why this is so interesting. Because if let's just go down the rabbit hole for a second and assume that a foreign adversary has designed and implemented and
This is
fielded this
Chinese. This is
technology.
Russian. Right.
Let's
Okay.
just say it's Chinese, and for the last several decades, the Chinese have managed to have this technology that completely makes obsolete every and any weapon system that we have. They can fly over our airspace. There's not a damn thing we can do about it. They can fly over the White House within seconds, basically nullifying every single aircraft, missile that we have, all of it. That's a problem. This would be an intelligence failure at the scale of 9/11. Because it means that despite our very best intelligence collection efforts and all 18 organizations and the billions of dollars we spend each year, someone has managed to gain a strategic surprise and advantage over the United States. That's problematic. So at a minimum, that's what we're dealing with.
Right.
It could also be something very different. It might not be foreign adversarial. It might be a completely different paradigm that we're dealing with. And I think we need to keep all options on the table until they're no longer on the table.
Right. No, I agree. And so it's almost like, so it's either human or it's not. And kind of the worst case scenario might be that it's human. Because like you said, that would be a failure that would be the biggest failure in history of our military, which, by the way, is
I almost hope that it's not human,
Yeah.
because that means we've got bigger problems on our hands.
Yeah. Right. That would be pretty awful. Okay. So this is the Tic Tac. It's been around for decades. Unbelievable performance. That is really that is something for sure. There's these other vehicles too. You talked about the triangles and the weather. They're not weather balloons. Maybe they are. I don't know. But if these things, if they're not going that fast, we ought to be able to track them and figure out where they came from. Right.
Yeah, one would think. And that's part of what we call the U.S. air domain awareness. There is a huge conglomerate of U.S. government organizations that their whole job is to maintain awareness of of U.S. airspace, U.S. controlled airspace. That's the job of NORAD. That's the job of the Air Domain Awareness Working Group, Interagency Working Group. I mean, we put a lot of money, time, and effort and talent trying to maintain awareness over our controlled space. And there's a reason why there's a no-fly zone over certain parts of Washington, D.C., right? Because of what happened during 9/11. We keep a very close eye on those assets and equities that we were trying to protect, just like over our sensitive military installations.
Right.
So if there's a technology that can come out there and unabated conduct reconnaissance and surveillance, and there's not a damn thing we can do about it. Yeah, that's probably problematic.
So Chris told me there was a THAAD missile battery maybe in Guam, and there's some Belgium F-16 pilots. So just run us through like what's been happening with the triangles, what's been happening with the balloons or whatever,
Yeah, well, the triangles are something that have been seen for some time. They've been seen internationally. They've been reported by military eyewitnesses and backed up by electro-optical data and electromagnetic capabilities like radar. So we are dealing with something. It's real, whatever it is. Now, of course, there's all sorts of people that go down the rabbit hole of speculation. There's a lot of these conspiracy theorists that talk about it's some sort of secret U.S. craft called the TR-3B. There's absolutely no indication or information that validates that. And certainly when you're testing, this as a test pilot. Let me ask you, Terry, when you test a new capability, where do you test that aircraft if there's something super secret we don't want to tell anybody? Well, you test it over a test range, right?
Or California. Yeah, right. There's in the desert Southwest is where we would test that stuff.
Yeah. Would you fly that over downtown Chicago or downtown LA if you wanted to keep it a secret?
Probably not. There's people. Yeah, people have these things, and they'll put it on Twitter if you do.
Exactly. So it doesn't make much sense. I mean, you are a test pilot yourself. You know the protocol for when we're testing something that we don't want our adversaries to see. And you don't do that type of test flight over major metropolitan populated U.S. cities. That's not how you keep a secret.
That's what's happened with these things.
That's exactly what's happened with several of these things, and they are being seen by a lot of eyewitnesses at the same time.
But are they moving? Is the triangle moving? 13 miles a second like the Tic Tacs are?
It can. So what we've seen is that typically they tend to loiter and move very, very, very slow. And then all of a sudden, and silently, and then all of a sudden, in a blink of an eye, boom, they're gone, just like the Tic Tac over the horizon. And it's hard to imagine something with that type of mass, right? Something that large.
How big are they? How large is it?
Well, some have been reported to be, the size of a city block or so. That's huge, right? That's a lot. Think of an aircraft carrier, right? You wouldn't expect an aircraft.
That's not an airplane.
That's an airplane. Right. That's an aircraft carrier. And imagine that thing all of a sudden, deciding to shoot over the horizon, and by the way, no associated signature. So no sonic boom, no contrail, none of the things you normally associate with, an aircraft flying in the sky. Even the acoustic signatures, like I said, sonic boom, it's not there. There's no sonic boom.
That's weird. I mean, there's air. It's moving through air. And when a space shuttle comes back to Earth, it makes the trail you can see for hundreds of miles. It's burning plasma. So these things move that fast without leaving any plasma trail.
Correct. There's no heat ablation. Wow. There's no atmospheric ionization that we typically associate with vehicles, and friction, air friction coefficients. All that it doesn't seem to apply here.
Was there an incident in Phoenix? I remember reading about that with the triangles. That was triangles.
The Phoenix Lights. Now, a lot of people get confused because you have Davis-Monthan down in Tucson, and it's common for the A-10s to go up and drop out. We call it Willie P, white phosphorus flares, and you can see them. And in a black background, they can appear sometimes to look like shapes, but they tend to burn out. There was a mass sighting over Phoenix called. They descend with and they go with the relative wind. But that's not what we're dealing with here. There's the Phoenix Lights was seen by hundreds, if not thousands, of people in Phoenix. It was even seen by the governor, who admitted this. Well, you know what? I'm going to do a thing here. I'm going to let your audience look that up because I don't want to give too much away. I think this will be a great homework assignment. It's called the Phoenix Lights. Just type
Yeah.
that Phoenix Lights
Right.
UFO incident,
Okay.
and the whole breakdown is there.
Okay.
But even the governor saw it, and he came out. And he said, at first he tried to make fun of it. He did this press announcement, and then later, I guess because so many people were upset with him and said, I saw it too. Don't make fun of it. He came out and said, no, you know what? I saw it too, and it really wasn't funny. We don't know what this was.
But so were they? Here's the thing, though. There are people with radar. If nothing else, the FAA has these air traffic control radars that are for airliners, so they should be able to see them on radar, and they should be able to see where they took off and landed from. No.
Well, that's part of the low observability issue that we have because sometimes the radar, when you look from the pilot's perspective, they're having a hard time locking on. Sometimes they can lock onto it, sometimes they
Right.
can't. Sometimes they get these weird, nonsensical returns, almost as if there's some sort of active jamming or spoofing going on.
Right.
The long story short here is that my time at ATIP, there were some very smart people, not me, excluding me, but there were some smart scientists and whatnot who were able to come up with a very interesting theory, and that there is a certain technology that if you can master it, all those 5 observables are possible. We initially thought when we first started ATIP that maybe there were 5 separate exotic technologies responsible for each one of these, observables. And you see the efforts in the DIRDs and all the reports that we did with the government on exotic propulsion and whatnot. But it turns out that if you know how to manipulate space time and not a lot, just a little bit, the space time fabric of space time, all these observables are possible. It also may explain why we're having this weird nonsensical return on radars. It also may explain why you don't have the associated issues such as air friction, like we said, right, and the acoustic signatures. It turns out that if you know how to engineer and manipulate space time in a localized area, a lot of things that seem magical really all of a sudden become reality. And we've seen some of the micro experiments now at the CERN, the Large Hadron Collider, that seems to be substantiating a lot of this speculation right now.
So we're bringing in, nuclear physicists and astronomers and cosmologists to understand, extreme physics to explain what we're seeing on our F-18 radars and air traffic control radars and that kind of thing.
That is the next step to open up the aperture of this and bring in under the tent a much broader audience, bring in people, contributors, bring in more scientists, more academics, bring in, if it was up to me, rather than being a UAP task force, which, as you know, in government terms means a temporary body to do a temporary job, I'd create an enduring capability. I would create something whole of government. I would do something like a federal national lab, like we have, bring in Department of Energy, FAA, NOAA, DHS, DOD, the IC, the intelligence community, bring everybody, lottie-dottie, bring in academia to come in from the universities and look at this. I would look at this topic very much like a peaceful version of the Manhattan Project, where we bring the best and brightest to look at this.
That's funny. Normally, I mean, the Russians have been stealing our stuff for 50 years, and the Chinese are obviously active in trying to steal our technology. But now we need to do the same thing to figure out what these things. We're basically the tables are turned on us. So triangles. What else? You just said they're the size of a city block. They can go from 0 to 1 million instantly. What are they doing? Are they just moving around and observing us? Or
well, that we don't know. I mean, there's a lot of people that have theories. The problem for me is that we don't have enough data yet to really where one theory stands out more than another, and we need more data. And so I'm very careful never to offer my own opinion because I don't think we have enough data yet. There's a whole lot of reasons why something might want to be here. There's the practical. I mean, intentions, right? I mean, there's a practical sense that if you're really dealing with some sort of exotic technology, and there's so look, we know there's 2 ways to bend space-time, thanks to Einstein, E = mc squared. And so what you have is either a lot of mass, like the Earth's mass is disrupting space-time around us, perturbing it a little bit, and that's why our GPS clocks, this atomic cesium clocks, they run at a different rate than the clocks here on Earth. because the mass of the Earth is actually warping space-time. So the
Yeah.
heavier an object is, the more it warps space-time.
Mhm.
Well, same thing with energy. Just turns out you need a whole lot of energy to warp space-time. And it's possible that, if you really wanted to get to the fundamental elements of the universe, and so let me backtrack a little bit. The smaller you go in size and mass, the tighter energy is held in little packets, if you will. So if I take this glass of water and I change its phase, it's a 1 × 10⁻³ energy release, and it's called steam. And for quite a while, we've been using steam engines to do a lot of our work because it's an exponential to the third times greater energetic yield. Well, it took the Chinese to realize that if you actually broke up the molecular bonds, a chemical, exothermic reaction like gunpowder, that's a 1 × 10⁴ yield. And then we did that, of course, mankind realized that in the 11th century. It took us about another 1,000 years to realize, well, if I started splitting up the atom, not the molecule, but the atom itself, a fission type reaction, that's a 1 × 10⁵ yield, okay, in terms of kiloton yield. And then it took about 25 years later for us to realize, well, hell, I can break up the nucleus of an atom, right? And now that's literally a nuclear, not an atomic, but a nuclear yield, which is 1 × 10⁶, or better referred to as a megaton yield, and so forth and so on and so on. So the smaller you go down, right, the more energy is held tightly, but when it's released, it's much more. And so one of the theories is that perhaps if there was someone has figured out how to warp space-time using energy, they could be using hydrogen, which is most abundant element in the universe,
right?
Because it's already kind of broken up to its fundamental atom. The problem is that if you wanted to mine hydrogen out in the universe, it could take you quite a while, because even though it's so abundant, it's dispersed. It's in gaseous clouds. There's only one place you find hydrogen where it is super concentrated, and that's water, H2O.
Right.
Once you
or in
bind
a
an
star,
oxygen,
you go in a star.
yeah,
But
or you go to star,
that
right?
would be
That
painful.
probably would, yeah, probably not advisable. So maybe the reason why these things are hanging out around water is because, frankly, we're just a convenient gas station. We simply don't know. I mean, there's all sorts of different hypotheses that have been put forward while I was my time at ATIP.
So the triangle. I want to get back to the triangles. People have written that they're drones, that the Chinese have really, they're poking us in the eye with these drones. I've got my DJI drone. These are just advanced drones.
When was the drone first really implemented in the United States and abroad from a commercially available perspective? Probably about 10 years ago, right? The little quadcopters.
Quadcopters, yeah.
I remember when I was in the 1990s, late 1990s, I was part of the Pioneer and Hunter UAV program. Okay, those were the best UAVs. This is before we had Predator and all that. These were basically miniature Cessnas that we outfitted to be remote controlled. And that was the best UAV programs that we had at the time. And then we came up with something called Dark Star.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
I chased the Global Hawk when I was a test pilot in 1999, 2000. Yep.
Right. You got it. So, and that was really it.
But those are airplanes. Those are just airplanes without people. Those are not quadcopter drones. Right.
My point being is that we were chasing these triangles back in the 80s and even earlier on, before drone technology was even not only a reality, but even thought of. So, it's one can stipulate that these are all drones. Well, sure, maybe some of them are, but they weren't back then. It's like going, as I told people before, it's like walking into King Tut's tomb for the very first time, and all of a sudden seeing a fully assembled 747 sitting in there. It doesn't make sense. The time period doesn't make sense. You could go back now and put pieces of 747 back into the tomb now, but you wouldn't expect to see one, the moment you open up a tube that has been sealed for 3,000-4,000 years. It just doesn't make sense. It's the same thing.
Right. So where have the triangles been seen? There was the Guam, the THAAD.
All over the world.
THAAD is a surface area. Yeah.
All over the world. They've been seen in Russia. They've been seen out of the Pacific, over the ocean. They've been seen in Europe. They've been seen in the United States. They've been seen in South America. Pretty much wherever there's a human being, a presence of human beings, they have been seen.
And these are legit report. These aren't guys on mushrooms, and these aren't the UFO Hunter Society of Russia or
No,
whatever it
these
is.
are trained military eyewitness people. These
Okay.
are, I'm not interested in grandma seeing some lights in the
Right.
backyard. My job
Right.
was only with trained military observers, and that was backed
Right.
up by some sort of data.
Okay. So you've seen data, you've seen military reports. I assume, have you talked to people who've seen these things?
Yeah, absolutely.
And they're legit people.
Yeah, they're legit people, as legit as you are.
And are these, well, that's not very legit. Hopefully you found better than that. Are these drones? Are these Chinese drones that they figured out how to make quadcopters flying around?
No, they're not. I mean,
Okay.
I'm sure
I'm going to
now
push on you. I'm going to be the skeptic. I'm going to push. Okay.
sure,
Yeah.
sure.
Okay.
Again, look, let's deconstruct this logically. Okay, you're talking about your drone. How far can you fly your drone?
Well, unfortunately, I crashed it in the lake behind my house. But when it used to be a lot, and it didn't bubble and float back up, it just went to the bottom. But I'm, a
How far can you fly?
couple kilometers for
Okay,
20 minutes.
great. 20 minutes, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So, what type of technology would it take to fly a drone, not a couple kilometers, but perhaps several hundred miles, loiter over the deck of a ship for, let's say, 3-4 hours, and then disappear under the waves, and then do that night after night after night? Um,
Yeah.
I'm not asking you a serious question. What drone technology right now is available that we have that can do transmedium travel, that can loiter, by the way, with no long range, long distance, right? So there's, as we know how to communicate, there's only two ways you can get over the horizon communications for something like that, unless you have a repeater aircraft, right? That's sending
Right.
signals. You can
Right.
do it through satellite and prearranged GPS coordinates and satellite, or you've got to be closer to your target. Well, there isn't anything that we're seeing that's closer to the target. We're the only ships out there, some cases for 100 miles. Where are they being launched from? Where are they getting their fuel? If they can't be using electric battery because you don't have the duration and the endurance.
Yeah.
So now you have to find an alternative fuel source, which means probably some sort of internal combustion engine, which means now more weight, which means a bigger, robust platform, which now means more support services for that and launch capability. You can't just hold that in your hand to launch it. You're going to need some sort of launch pad somewhere that's stable enough to hold that type of weight for that type of enduring mission, right? And oh, by the way, not get shot down. Oh, by the way, you said your drone fell into the lake. Well, we haven't found a single one of these drones floating in the water. We
Are we
haven't found
looking?
one.
Are we looking?
Of course, we're looking. Yes, absolutely, we're looking.
My brain is spinning here. I'm actually working with a UAM company, which is a, excuse me, like a flying taxi. This is the big thing. And, we're
Sure.
looking at an hour, maybe 2 hours, maybe, 100-mile range kind of thing, 100 miles an hour. Those are kind of the
Right.
numbers that the flying taxis are hoping to get to. They're not there yet, but they're hoping to.
No, they're not. And
And there's a lot of money.
we're
There's a lot of
using,
money in it. There's a lot of money being
yeah,
put doing that. Yeah.
we're using lithium ion batteries,
Right.
and we're looking at something that we still don't have the technology to do that, and yet that's exactly what we're seeing.
So these are Navy ships. You're talking about U.S. Navy surface vessels, blue water ops. There's no horizon anywhere nearby.
Correct.
They're seeing these things fly over them in formation. Are they doing anything? What's happening out there?
Sometimes they're just hovering over our capabilities.
Do we try and shoot them down?
I'm not going to elaborate on what countermeasures the U.S. government might or might not be employing. I'm going to leave that up to the government to make that statement. But as you know, we do have counter drone technology. We do have that. It's not that tough to zap one of these things if it was a drone. If I'm on my boat in the Chesapeake and I come within 300 feet of a ship, they have the authorization to shoot me out of the water. And by the way, they will. So same thing holds true for drones.
Right.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend taking a drone and trying to tease a U.S. Navy warship. That's not advisable.
So obviously we haven't been able to shoot one down, or we haven't gotten one of these things, have we? Do these things exist in a hangar Area 51? Or even better,
Uh,
Area 50? No one ever talks about Area 52. That's the
that's
area.
right. That's right. Area 52. Yeah, I've said that before. I'm not going to elaborate. I've said for the record, and I'll stick to what I've said before. It is my belief that the U.S. government is in possession of extremely exotic material, and that's about all I can say about that right now. I have to be careful of still have my security clearance,
Oh, you still have a
at least
clearance?
today. I do. I still have my TS clearance.
Okay, mine expired years ago. Not that I never knew anything. I was at NASA. I mean, NASA is not a place of secrets. It's, the Russians fly with us. I never knew anything really good. So I'm learning more now than I ever learned when I was with the government. So so there are these, and these are all triangles that we're talking about right now.
Well, no, we're not talking about just triangles. We're now talking about drones, right? Because we
Right.
switched from triangles, the large triangles being observed, to now drones that have been, or what people refer to as drones, which in reality probably many cases aren't drones. In some cases they are, but therein lies the problem and some of the confusion, because now people are reporting so much, which is a good thing, right? We want, it's the old saying, see something, say something.
Right.
So people are now finally reporting, but with that, you're going to get a lot of noise, in
Right.
that reporting. So
Right.
now the challenge is separating, the noise from the signal.
Right. There was some video released recently. It looked like night vision goggles. It was that green, night camera look and there were some
Infrared.
lights. Right. Exactly. And so that was, I think, was that a quote unquote triangle that they released? And there was also pictures
Well,
of
that
balloons.
yeah, that was a video of a vehicle. Now the question, the jury is still out. Was it an effect of the lens, what was referred to as bokeh effect, because the aperture as the lens closed becomes a triangular shape, and what you're seeing is actually just a conventional aircraft or drone through that effect, or are we looking at something truly legitimate? Is it an actual active light source coming from the aircraft that's blinking like an aircraft navigational lights? Or are those lights actually being reflected off of a smooth bottom from something below? There's still a lot of questions regarding that. That video came out after I left the Pentagon. I know a little bit about that particular incident, but I certainly don't have available to me all the information. So I want to be careful not to speculate too much.
Right.
The Pentagon has said that it was a legitimate video and it was being
Yeah.
used by the UAP task force. But beyond that, I want to be careful to speculate.
Okay. But again, if it's a drone, it may be low observable, but it's not zero observable. And we should be able to track where it takes off from and lands at. And if it's a drone in open water operations, it's got to be taken off and landing from a boat or a submarine or something. I mean,
That's right. That's
the
right.
drones that can hover can't travel thousands of miles.
Exactly. And
And
those
if
that
they
can
do,
travel
you can
thousands
track
of
them.
miles can't
If,
hover. Right. Exactly. And that's my point that I've
right.
said before. Fixed wing, it's got to move. You got to create
The
lift under the wings, and you have to
global
be
hawk,
going
right?
right. You have to have a sufficient speed to
Yeah.
maintain lift. If you want to hover, then your loiter time goes way down, because your energy now is being transferred rather than from 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 horizontal to
Right.
vertical,
Right.
right? And so you're wasting your fuel doing that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's no real capability we have right now that can fly for thousands of miles and then hover for 3 or 4 hours and then fly thousands of miles. We don't have that yet.
So if there's a destroyer out in the middle of the Pacific and these things show up, clearly the Spy One radar is tracking it. Where did it come from and where did it go?
Great question. That's
You,
absolutely correct. And
you
look, things
can't.
don't just appear.
Yeah.
Well, I can tell, yeah. I mean, with the Nimitz incident, they popped in at 80,000 feet. They came in from somewhere. We picked them up at 80,000 feet. So that means they came in from higher than that, and we picked them up at 80,000 feet. And then we retract them going 50 feet over, hovering 50 feet over the water, and then bouncing back up and zipping off past 80,000 feet again. Where it went, nobody knows, but we were looking up to 80,000 feet and it went beyond 80,000 feet. So,
Wow.
You tell me.
And there's data here, but the problem with is the government bureaucracy classification system is that, as you know, there's so many holes and it's all need to know. So I may have seen one thing, but I don't know. So there's not a lot of people that have.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I apologize. My phone, I just got interrupted, so that's why we lost signal. I apologize. Okay. I'm being told that I have I think I have a schedule conflict right now. I was told that I have some folks waiting, so I just want to let you know I got probably a couple minutes, but okay. I think I'm going to have to
wrap it up.
And we can come back again and do this some other time as well if you want. I hate to be this way, but I guess they had scheduled us for an hour, and now I'm already stepping on the toes of somebody right now.
Let's wrap it up. These balloons, these Navy, or there's some pictures of these translucent balloons. Anything interesting about those? If it's a balloon, again, we should be able to track it. What are these things doing?
Sure. Again, that you're asking the questions that we've all asked. If these are balloons, then we should know it's a balloon. They should have a very specific path. And by the way, balloons do not travel against the wind in 120 knots. That doesn't happen. Balloons float with the wind, with the prevailing winds. They don't go against it, as you know, right? Unless they have some sort of.
They're not floating. Device. They're not floating with the wind. They're moving.
No, they're moving. We have the radar data. We have it on gun camera footage. You can see them. They are moving against the headwind. I mean, it's not, the ones that are of interest to us are the ones that are not behaving like a balloon. And that's what I think people fail to recognize. That for us is a litmus test. A balloon is a balloon. A balloon doesn't behave like an aircraft.
Right.
Unless it's some sort of hybrid technology, which is something that we're really not aware of yet.
The balloon's airspeed is always 0, and their ground speed is whatever the wind speed is, and so this
absolutely
is what's happening. Right? Okay. You got to go, Lou. This conversation is not over. I want to know the real data, and that's compartmentalized in secret places with people that aren't talking with each other. And I know I don't know the bureaucracy specifically, but I know the bureaucracy where all this stuff is hidden.
Understood.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on board. I know we gotta run. You're late.
Terry, I've got one question for you, even though I've got to jump here. I have heard that space has a very distinctive smell, almost like an ionization smell. Now, obviously, the vacuum of space doesn't really have a smell, but there's something associated. Can you share with me for just a moment, because I'm dying to know from somebody who's been there.
The smell of space. So, what does a strawberry smell like?
Great question. It's hard to explain, right?
It's hard to describe a smell, right?
Yeah.
There's all kinds of smells that's hard to describe. So, when a spacewalker comes inside in his spacesuit, you can go up and smell the fabric of the spacesuit. Or when a cargo ship docks and you open the hatch, you can go smell the part of the spaceship that was just out, and it's kind of musty. It's kind of electric, like the old railroad trains that we had when we were kids. There was that electric smell. It's mechanical. It's if I smelled it, I would go, you were just in space. I would know it immediately. But it's hard to describe it. But I would describe it as musty, electrical, and unlike anything else I'd ever smelled before.
Wow. Yeah. Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that with me. I've always been told that. I was dying to hear from an expert like you who's actually been there and done that. So thank you.
Watch more podcast clips now on our YouTube channel. Go to Livewire Podcast Clips and watch more great podcast videos just like this one.